Click the links for Odyssey, Bit Chute, join the Telegram or the Gab or Support channel and Coffee, the various other links. What do you do when the media is not the media anymore? And the media hasn't been the media for a while, but when they kind of go mask off to conceal a story. So this is an interesting story in the way they frame the language and they frame the narrative. So Reuters conceals a true story. What happened, it was, just looking at it, you see a right-wing extremist demonstration and then riots erupt. So think about that, just the structure of the language, riots erupt. Usually the media would say, well, because of these people, this group did this. But the two concepts are linked together, right-wing, extreme, and riots erupting. And then they show a burning police car and then some figure. So you have that in your mind. Anyway, so Reuters conceals the true story. So what happened was a guy wants to burn a religious book, 3 Abrahamic religions. Got to be careful on YouTube naming them, but you can probably do the math. It's sort of a test, a poop test for civilization. You should be able to burn any book you want anywhere without a problem. If you can't, then that's the future of your nation, as Europe is rapidly learning. Because what happened was violence magically erupted. This that is a different story. The what happens to the civilization after you have a group that has in-group preferences and will resort to violence to protect their views and advance their causes versus a group that won't resort to violence. Well, I mean, it's just kind of a game theory solution there. So, but that's a different story, and it's definitely not one that would be allowed on YouTube. This story is as far as I can go on YouTube, and even this is kind of a little bit iffy. And for this kind of story, if they don't like what you're saying, if you say too many hot words, they won't even give you a strike on the channel. They'll just delete your channel and block you. So the story here is how Reuters frames the story in a passive voice. Riots erupt. Usually the media would tell you who the party, what is it, who, what, where, how, why, and when, who the parties are and who did what. Here, the parties are in a location, and one party is named the extremist far-right group who wanted to burn a book as a little bit of a demonstration, which they have the right to do, or at least they thought they had the right to do. And, eventually they'll change the laws to prohibit you from burning some books. Because otherwise you're left with a situation where the country has to make some hard choices, and they don't want to make those choices. But you can force their hands by doing things like this, by burning books that they don't want you to burn, because you get a predictable response, and people need to see that. And you got a lot of boomer normies who are like, oh, you shouldn't burn the book. Well, up until a few years ago, we had the right to burn books that we bought, we owned. We could burn them as political demonstrations. So what changed? You're saying you're willing to give up civil liberties to placate a group that will use violence to advance their interests. That seems like you're acquiescing to terrorism, because you are. Anyway, so who are these groups? Who are these counter protesters? And how did violence just magically erupt? Well, this is a very short article and it doesn't go into details. Who actually did the violence? Why did I read this article and feel like I didn't actually read anything? So it's brief. I can read the whole thing in like a minute. So Stockholm, well, the whole thing. The riots erupt, and the far-right extremist demonstration, burning police cars. Counter-protesters set fire to police bus ahead of a demonstrators planned by Danish I'll say Abrahamic politician and his political party. So Sweden, violent riots erupted in the central Swedish city as counter-protesters, but they don't say who the counter-protesters are, attacked police ahead of a planned right-wing extremist demonstration. So just the first sentence, you're saying the right-wing is an extremist group, but yet the counter-protesters are the ones who did the violence. Right in the first paragraph, your framing doesn't make any sense. If the right wing is peaceful and the left wing, presumably left wing, in this case, not really left wing, they're that Abrahamic group. They're the ones who immediately did violence. Your framing is nonsense right from the start. I mean, this is so on the nose, ridiculous, mask off. I mean, this is so 1984 that even normies are looking at this and going, "Wait, this isn't the news anymore. This is just you're just defending this group to fit a narrative." Police said on his website that 4 police cars had been set on fire by the counter-protesters, and at least 4 police officers and 1 individual had been injured as these protesters threw stones and large groups attacked police cordons and tore down the fences. So all the violence is coming from one side, and yet you label the right-wing extremist demonstration. Really weird. The demonstration, which had received police permission, was organized by this political leader, far-right guy. They canceled the demonstration to calm the situation. Why did they need to calm the situation? Because the extremist counter-protesters of that Abrahamic group were doing violence. And then they had this, I guess they had stayed for a few hours. A number of counter-protesters against planned demonstrations by the political group, some of which were canceled in Swedish cities, had turned violent this week. So the counter-protesters are violent, but you're calling the right-wing extremists. In Swedish cities, news agency said the violence erupted. Again, violence erupted, as opposed to saying specifically who's doing it and who was arrested for it, assuming you're arresting these people, because what kind of names do they have if they're arrested? Are they Swedish names? If they're in the country, they're Swedish, bigot. Okay. So violence erupts after, and this is the last sentence, or the next last sentence in the story, which tells you the whole story. It's weird that they don't lead with this. Violence erupted in Stockholm suburb after Paludan earlier on Friday set fire there to a copy of the Quran. Weird how you wouldn't lead with that. So that's the story. Is an extremist right-wing group, and then riots erupt. So the story you should open with is the guy tried to burn a book, and that group who followed the book were immediately violent. That's the first paragraph, tells us what's going on in the story, and you manage to conceal the true nature of the story until the very last line. What do you do when the media is... This isn't, I mean, is it lies by omission? It's like you can parse the story, and then, the real story is told in, this is some rare foundation. I'm not familiar with it. It tells you the full story of what goes on, and it just tells you right up front what happened. They tried to burn this book as a kind of a shit test for civilization, and the usual suspects who follow that book immediately got violent. That's the story. And then the story that flows from that is, well, what are we going to do about this situation? We live in a liberal republic where we have civil liberties to do things and take part in civilization. And you have a group of people who will use violence to advocate and advance for their own interests. What are you going to do? Oh, Amy Mack, I remember her. She was on Twitter for a long time. What are you going to do about that? Well, that's another video, and it's not for YouTube. Someone said, why do you still put videos on YouTube? It's got a really big outreach. Like I did a video on that guy the other day. I already forget his name, the Subway guy. And it's probably going to get 1,000 views on my secondary YouTube channel, which only has like 300 subs. So YouTube has got such a huge platform that you got to use it when you can. And if it means I have to substitute a couple of words out to give you the gist of the story, and I can put it on Odyssey, Bit Chute, Rumble, YouTube, even Gap TV. I can put it everywhere. Well, it's worth it to just substitute, say Abrahamic religion instead of say that hot word for YouTube. Anyway, if you'd like to support the channel, please do so on Coffee, and I will eventually upgrade the setup, or join the Telegram. It's a good way to keep in touch, and I get the feeling you're going to need Telegram in the future if you want to form like a neighborhood safety group. That's the subject of my next video, but that will be for Odyssey and Bit Chute.